Hey everyone, welcome back to our Unity 6 2D platformer series. In today's video we're going to be going over player physics and some movement. We're going to be covering rigid bodies and colliders. We're going to be creating and naming our first scripts. We're going to be coding some movement and some basic jumping, and if there's time we'll add in a double jump as well. So let's jump right in. First thing we're going to do is, while we have this, if you notice there's this little asterisk, it might be time to save it, is what that's saying. So press Control S. Actually, it just means that there's no, you haven't saved it and you have changes. So then the change I made here was just naming the player. Let's start setting up our physics though. As we get this ready, let's go ahead and add in our inspector. We're going to go over here and add component. We're going to add a rigid body 2D. We're also going to add a collider. Let's look for a capsule collider 2D right here. And let's open up our rigid body here. Just in case there's time for a double jump, let's go ahead and set our gravity scale to 2. That way he's not floating away too far. 1 for the gravity scale just kind of makes it seem really floaty. Not a fan. And then we want to freeze the Z rotation right here. So open up constraints, then go to freeze rotation. Just check that box next to the Z, and you'll see that that will prevent it from rolling around on the ground as far as the sprite goes while you're moving. Let's open up our capsule collider and let's zoom in on our player so we can see what we're doing. Reset these to 1 so we can see what that's at. I like the radius width of 1. I'm not a fan of the radius length of 1 though, so let's bump that up to 1.5. And let's bring this down by half a unit, and that looks about right. I mean, I guess I could put in part of the tail. We could make it like a 2. Nope, never mind. Let's not do that. 1.5. And then bring this over. Like that. You could do that. But you could run into some issues since it's circular on platforms. If you hit the corner just right and then you slide right off. So I'm gonna go ahead and just leave it like this for now. And then the next thing we're gonna do is we're gonna add an empty game object to our player. We're gonna name this ground check. We want to get this ready for the scripting. Let's go ahead and add some players here. Add some layers. So if you didn't see what I did, I went over here to layer, clicked on add layer, and we got some built-in ones, but we don't really see one for the player, so let's add one for the player. We're gonna need one for the ground, so we'll add one in for the ground as well. And I'm gonna put the player on the player layer, and the ground is gonna be on the ground layer. So now that that's all set up, let's go about creating our first script, shall we? Open up your scripts folder in your project menu or panel. Go to right click, and we're going to go to create scripting mono behavior script. We're going to go ahead and name this in Pascal casing, so each letter or each word will have a capital letter. We're going to name it player control, no spaces, and then double click to open that up. While that's loading, hopefully you guys are finding these videos easy to follow, enjoyable. I want to drop a like and a subscribe and we can keep it going. Probably keep it going anyways, to be honest, but that's okay. Anyways, let's add some variables. So I like to be super organized. If I have to search for things, I get really annoyed really quickly. So I'm going to add a header in here, and I'll show you what that looks like in just a minute. Then I'm going to add some public variables. First one is going to be a float. A float is a number, right? But it's a number that includes like decimals. It's all the in-between stuff versus just an integer, which is a whole number. And that first one is going to be the move speed, which is going to be how fast the player moves when we press the left and right movement keys. The second one is going to be jump force, also a float. And that's going to be how high the character moves in the air when we press the jump button. The next header I'm going to make, I apologize, I've been having a lot of coughing fits. My wife just got done being sick, so hopefully I am not catching that. Next one we're going to make under the ground detection, or first one we're going to make under ground detection, is a transform variable. So it's going to be the position, location, rotation, etc. of our ground check. And this is going to be the point to detect if the player is on the ground. From there, we're going to add a public layer mask. We're going to name it ground layer. And this is going to be where we determine what layer is the ground layer. Public and float ground check radius equals 0.2f. This is also a float. This is going to be the range for checking if we're overlapping as the player with the ground layer. Alright, and then we're going to add some private variables, stuff that we're only going to access through code. First one's going to be a reference to the rigid body. The next one is going to be some movement input variable that's going to be a float. That way we don't have to just keep typing in input.get access, etc, etc, etc. We're going to be able to use that to shorten it up. And then the last one for now is going to be a boolean. It's private to determine whether it's grounded or not. A boolean is a true or false variable. It either is or it isn't. It can only have one of two results to it. So, all right, now where some people would probably put this in the start function, I want to initialize and tell the game what the rigid body is as soon as it powers on. I don't want it to have to wait for the game to load. So instead of putting the reference to get the rigid body in the start function, I'm actually going to use awake and type in RB equals get component rigid body 2D. Oops. There we go, and then that. This will make sure that the rigid body is assigned as before the game even starts. And then what we're going to do is in our excuse me, update function, we're going to go ahead and type in move input and set that up. It's going to be equal to the input dot get access of the horizontal axis, which is predefined left and right axis of movement. It's going to be -1 for left and a value of 1 for moving right. Next we're going to do is tell it to move the player, and that's going to be this linear velocity, rb.linearVelocity. It's going to be equal to a new vector2 because we're only moving in two directions. So we move input, oops, let's open up them parentheses, move input, and that's going to be take into account the move speed. Next is rb.linearVelocity of y for the upward movement as well. Alright, next thing. And this should be 2 arguments right here. I put a comma there. It should have been times move speed. My apologies. There we go. Sorry. The pause was I was trying to figure out why I had that red line. And then for some reason up here I typed in public and private, and it's only supposed to be public. Next thing we're going to do is type in is grounded. We're going to set that boolean up by telling it that if the physics 2D, or we're going to tell it to draw a circle, rather, overlap circle, have the ground check dot position and the ground check radius. So it's going to draw a circle from the ground check position. It's going to utilize the ground check radius to determine the radius of the circle it's going to draw. And now we're going to tell it what layer it's looking for by typing in ground layer. And if all this checks out and it overlaps with the ground layer, then it's telling the code that the player is in fact grounded. Alright, so next thing we're going to do is some jumping and movement. So, whoops, not is grounded. It should be if we press the key. So input.get key down. So we want to only check if we're pressing the key, not if we're holding the key. And the key we're looking for is the space bar. So keycode.space. And so we're going to put 2 ampersands, so that's shift 7 is grounded. Open up some curly brackets. We're going to tell it if all those things check out, then you're going to do a thing, and that thing is jump. All right. Yes, I know I don't have a jump function, so you want to try to force me to type in jump force. The jump function is coming. Be patient. All right. So now that we got all that, let's go ahead and define our jump function or setup. Alright, so we're going to type in void jump, so just the way I got it up there, that way everything matches. And it's going to be very simple. It's going to be rb.linearVelocity is going to be equal to a new vector2 rb.linearVelocity.x and the jump force. Alright, so when we press Control S to save it and test that out, we click on our player. I haven't added the code yet, so we can just drag the player controller over here. And we got to set up our ground detection, otherwise nothing's going to work. So we're going to take our ground check, drop it over here under ground check. Our ground layer, we're going to set to ground, just like so. Let's go ahead and press play and let's see what happens. And I am looking at there for some reason. Where's my camera? Let's zoom out. Why is my camera over here? Alright, let's move this back where it was and try this again. There we go. So the space bar isn't working, so let's see what's going on there. Ground is set up. Whoop. Ground is set up. Let's look at our ground check, and that's why the ground check is currently at the player's head. Let's go ahead and move that down to the base of the feet. And now it should work just fine. Yeah, there we go. Alright. Ground check's working. Movement's working. Let's go ahead and get that double jump going, because we're only at 15 minutes. We got time for it. So Let's see. How do I want to do that though? Let's get back into our code. And we're going to start off by adding a few variables, I think. I want it to keep track of the jumps. And we also want it to have a maximum amount of jumps. So let's add a public integer. So this is going to be whole numbers, 1, 2, 3, 4, etc. And we're going to name this max jumps. And we're going to set it for now equal to 2. We're going to have another private integer this time. And jump count is what it's going to be called. Alright. And then how do I want this to go? In our input, we're going to use was grounded, which is going to store a variable that we're going to use to store the grounded state, and we're going to make it equal to whether it's grounded or not. Then let's do another conditional statement. We should be able to do something like is grounded and was not grounded before, then jump count will be equal to 0. And that should reset the jumps. Now we need to figure this one out. So the way this is going to work is we're going to go and jump count. So we're going to check to see if the jump count is going to be less than our max jumps. Then we're going to let this guy jump. And then we're going to increase the jump count. So that way when the player gets to our max jumps, which is currently set to 2, then he shouldn't be able to jump anymore. So let's go ahead and save that. Control S. Let that compile. And see what happens. So movement still works, so that's good. Single jump still works. And a double jump. And he only, regardless of how many times I press it, only does that extra bounce one extra time. So that's good. We got that working. And so what we did today is we added some physics elements to our player rigid body capsule collider. We created a movement script, very kind of basic, that checks for the ground and make sure the player is grounded. We also added a double jump ability real quick, just so we have that in case you guys want to make some high platforms in your game or higher than normal platforms. And that about covers it. In the next video, we're going to go over creating some animations for the player with the pre-built or pre-designed sprites. There we go. We're going to activate those animations through code, and if there's time, then we'll get into creating a camera follow script. All right, but I will see you guys in the next one.